And hello, everybody. Welcome back to Unslaved. We are so happy to be back with you and back with one of our OG guests, someone who's been a part of this podcast for quite a long time. It's Yerasimos. He's from Here for the Truth podcast, which you absolutely need to go and support. Yerasimos and Joel have been doing phenomenal work on their show, bringing the conversations that we need to have, and just amazing work that you guys have been doing over there, Yerasimos. It's always so good to see you. So welcome back to Enslaved, brother.
Yeah, thank you both for having me on. Thanks for the support. Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Yerasimos, you guys have been, maybe before we jump into today's topic, we're going to be talking about the nature of death and life and all things in between. But, maybe just give us an update on some of the things you guys have been covering on your show and how things have been going on your podcast lately.
Yeah, things have been going pretty well. I mean, as always, Joel and I, we just want to have the conversations that we want to have, and people seem to be enjoying them. I think like you guys, we cover a range of subjects. I mean, different approach in some ways, and I think similar in others. But yeah, things have been going well. I mean, the podcast keeps growing. We keep getting great feedback from our listeners. Yeah, I don't know why I can't think about like the different conversations we're having, but we love exploring things from a health standpoint, and I think also self-knowledge. Self-knowledge, I think, seems to be the piece that Joel and I really focus on. Even when, and I'm sure we'll get into it with this talk, even when we talk about truth, like what is that? And I've always been curious about the internal process and knowing oneself, and how does that support a person to live their life. And so we definitely explore subjects in that realm. But it's just been fun, that. And of course, we have our group coaching program, Rise Above the Herd. We're in our ninth run of it right now. And I just love it. I love the groups that come together, people that share values. And, we say, obviously, it's an individual process, going on this, individuation journey, this healing journey. And yet there really is great power when you come together, in community. We are social beings, and to be witnessed in our process, and for individuals to realize that, like, hey, like, I'm not alone in a certain sense. Like, my problems are unique, but they're not just like, oh, I'm the only one that's dealing with this. No one else is dealing with this problem. And I think that's the benefit of coming together in community in that regards, and honoring each other's individuality, as opposed to, forcing someone to be something else. So that's been a great process. Our Friends of the Truth community is growing. But yeah, we could talk all about that after.
Very good. Well, it's been great, and it's just been so fun to watch the success you guys have had. You're growing all the time, and I've had some feedback from even some of the Unslaved members who've been a part of some of the workshops, and everybody's loving it. So, if you're a member here, go and check it out. We'll put the links below. Go and support these guys, the great work that they're doing. But maybe, Michael, I'll pass it over to you to sort of kick things off as to the direction we're going to be going here today with Erasmus.
Well, it dawned on me that I checked out, because I was on that long ago. I checked out a future podcast, and lo and behold, it was about Yerasimos' father passing. That was from left field, sad event. And I had been already planning this whole spiel. I sent you guys the article, Philosopher of Death. It's something that we didn't get a chance to do, you and I, David. That article came, I wrote it, and then usually we follow up with a podcast. That one, I don't think we even really got into it, so it slipped by in the night. And now I found out, yeah, it's okay. Things happen for reasons, because now it's not that we're going to talk about this article, but it just seemed to me, oh, ding, what the hell? These tragic moments, Memento Mori. It's like remind yourself you're all going to perish at some point, and then it happens. And then there's a vortex opens up beneath your feet. It's the maximum amount of message of incompetence, because not you, not science. Science can hand, you nothing. There's nothing. There's rites and ceremonies of the dead, and there's the grief of the passing. and all of that. And the Victorians, just to mention Memento Mori, there's been epochs in our society in which death has been deeply avoided. I think that's been the main trajectory for all of time. But there are periods, where that changes, and the chivalric, romantic periods fade away, and then just like we saw with the Victorians, there's a little bit more of a contemplative thing. And in their regard, there's no question that the Gothic novel, what later would become even Gothic film or whatever, right? And the cult of death, the Victorian, it was all around Queen Victoria's passing. Everybody was wearing black. All the women were meant to wear black to grieve with the Queen. She wore black. Black jewelry became popular, and all of the different accoutrements to that. And so people in celebration of the Queen also start wearing black. And this was like the color of the Victorian age. But also there was this architecture involved, these monolithic graveyards and cemeteries, these special hymns, all of these, funerary processions, and a certain romantic contemplation, Gothic contemplation of mortality, which can become very morbid, of course, and not healthy, but also can be healthy. I mean, and the two healthiest pieces of art that came out of the Victorian era were both by Alfred Lord Tennyson, In Memoriam. It was a death of a school friend at Oxford that passed away unexpectedly, and he wrote a mammoth masterpiece of a poem on that, very philosophical. And then a second poem based on the same incident called The Two Voices. So those are the most sublime renditions. So it doesn't all have to become very morbid and gross. It can be very, very highly philosophical. So we have that. We have traditions. But then after the Victorian era passed away, this was all like, what is all this with the cobwebs and the Gothic art? The hell with that, but I was going to say that that Gothic idiom was kind of also an offshoot of the aesthetic movement. That's why there is this architecture, that you see in the graveyards of the weeping angels and, the cenotaphs and all of that. So it's not divorced from the aesthetic movement. So this is one of the first times where the whole concept of death actually becomes linked strangely, right? A lot of people have never thought about this or contemplate this. And even today, when, say birthday cards are given, or somebody sends you flowers, right? It's sort of the same thing, right? There's an aesthetic movement, and then there's this cult of the dead, and they've become linked. And I find that myself, rather interesting. And I'm very attracted to art and to music. There's certain bands that specialize in this kind of thing, right? And the philosophy behind that is there's a beauty in it. So this is where the modern mind just checks out. There's no beauty in that. But it goes back to the old adage. There's this Indian proverb. I don't know if it's in the Bhagavad Gita or where the hell it came from. But some sage told his disciple, because the disciple was asking nonstop questions about the nature of evil. And the sage said to him, well, then you just go out into the world right now and you go and find me something truly ugly. Right? He said, you just go out and you find me something that's truly ugly. And the sage and the disciple thought, well, that's going to be easy, right? The world is full of ugliness. And when he went out, he actually found out that this is very, very difficult, because any of the things that he normally would have in a common sense way thought was ugly, like shit or, goo or something else, actually on closer inspection has a fucking, amazing purpose and has strangely its own beauty. Something that Aleister Crowley had pointed out multiple times, but he did it in a controversial way, so nobody really got the message he was talking about. So there is beauty in life. There's beauty in death. Death is not ugly like we thought. And also, it is a matter of subjective perspective. right? This is what I had been thinking about before I heard the podcast that they had done. And that question. And maybe it's one of those imponderables. Maybe you're not going to have it all, laid out and classified. But the very connection between beauty and death, is something that's really rather amazing. And if anyone ever found this preposterous, okay, just stick on Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and come back to me and tell me that there's no beauty in death, right? Or Albinones or whatever. There is tragedy and there is ugliness. I didn't say that there wasn't. But there is also something running parallel to that, and it might open up a side of us that is actually more receptive and responsive to art. Ultimately to more meaning is what really, where Heidegger, would go. I mentioned that in the article, but I didn't mention this. And this was put on hold, until we were going to talk about it. So this idea that there is a beauty in it. And there is also the great sadness, of course. So somebody's left, a son, a mother, a wife, people, friends, that pine and go through this. It's part of an underworld cycle. We're always talking, and I know you guys do, about the rites of passage. Death is the ultimate rite of passage, right? Because we'll list all the ones that are rites of passage, come to death, and then move on and talk about something. No. Wait. Death is a very special rite of passage. In fact, so important is it that when you go through all the other ones, aren't they mini deaths? To go through one and to come out the other end, a man to go and get married and come out the other end as a husband, isn't that a death of the old that he was? And on it might go. The person who achieves enormous financial success, isn't that a death of the guy who lived in the little apartment and dreamed the dream, right? So there's always this, or the childbirth, or all the other rites of passage. They are actually mini deaths before you even get to the big one. So we got really questions there, but I was wondering that, now, can you remind me when this actually happened? It was very recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, it happened technically because my parents lived in New Jersey. It happened at like 1 or 2 in the morning on February 27th, Tuesday. So for me in LA, when my mother called me to inform me what was happening, it was like 11 o'clock, late in the evening. So yeah, pretty recent.
Oh, so it was almost calling you in real time then.
Yeah, it was in real time for sure.
It was
She called me to let me know that he was dealing with like a breathing issue again that he had in November, the end of November, and in January, where he went into the hospital for like 4 days each. And I flew back for both those experiences, and they were horrible experiences. He hated the hospital. He hated the experience, even who he turned into, like where he was psychologically, obviously, with whatever medication they were giving him. And he tried to get out, my dad, old school, like I think day one, the first visit or second visit, he was like, get me the fuck out of here, obviously in his thick Greek accent. He's like, I'm going to jump out of the window to get out of here. And because he said that, they had to bring in a psychiatrist and they had to put him on psych meds because of that, this early. Anyways, the visits weren't, too long. They were like 4 days, which weren't ideal. But we decided ultimately to put my father on hospice as a family. We said, listen, he did not want to go back to the hospital. We did not want him to go back to the hospital. And so we made that decision as a family. And so we put him on hospice care. Not that he needed it in a sense. It was just a nurse showed up like every week. But when this third instance happened, he was having the same breathing issues and his oxygen was lowering. And he told my mom, he's like, call 911. And my mom was just like, no, we say we not go to the hospital. We stay here. And he goes, you're right. And, it wasn't long after that, like he was having some breathing issues. And then he went into their bedroom to the window to get some fresh air. And he yelled out some Greek prayers. And he walked back into their room that they hang out on and watch TV. And he told my mom, he's like, this is it. I'm leaving this world.